don't think so. Oh, thank you. Probably different sometimes. Oh, yeah. I can't, Brandon, how are you?
Words, all this area.
So it's not like their cell phone, but.
Like seriously, they're about to.
If it does bring it.
I mean, it's normal, but it's not a, it's a.
Okay, cool. Yeah. See, it'll mess up. The public advocate. It's not like. It will, yeah. Talk it out like. That's the worst.
It's a lot of people.
All this camera gear. Sporty with that. Like hours left. Yeah, we can do that. Hey, Tom's on there, so what's he doing? Tom's right there?
What?
Hi, Tom.
But it does. So it looks like.
And is there gonna be other people coming on here too that I?
Yes, well, I'm not sure that you know, but.
Wait, Tanya's gonna be there too?
She's on there now.
Okay, good. Let her know that I'm told that things.
So,
I think I don't, just this.
I know they're open to.
Open chairs, let's take one. Ready to present, come sit over here. Sorry, they're not having.
Where's the check? So I've never, I don't think I've been.
We'll wait.
Yeah, definitely. It's crazy. Oh, yeah. With the water?
Not you.
Just. Okay, cool. But he's still.
Is your battery not last at all? So much. Not much of a laptop.
Yeah, but it's always actually.
Oh, dude. Okay, yeah. And you
Hours.
Yeah.
We've passed up at 7:21.
Keep your website.
Oh.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah. Put a sign there too.
Yeah.
Here we are talking about new website.
Right? Conversation starters, clearly effective.
And that is fine.
And they're not only a better one. Were you with us when they tried to launch a hot air balloon outside of wastewater?
Yeah. So, is it dry?
You know, it's
So that's just like, that's like,
It's a great picture. It's a beautiful picture. It's just a tethered down.
yeah. I think that it was just photo shoot.
He was meant for some.
Oh, okay, so that was it really unrealistic, that a balloon.
It happened. It's not. Photoshop, it happened. We'll take it.
Ready, you ready?
We're ready.
Okay, great. All right, one,
Are you on my fire?
John's interpreter.
okay, there we go. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Time is now 7:23 PM and the executive session has been concluded. No decisions were made and no actions were taken during the executive session. We're going to enter the regular meeting, right now, so, we took a roll call earlier. I don't think we need to do it again. All trustees are present. And we're going to go ahead. There's 4 items tonight on the consent agenda, and just want to go to the trustees. Is there any questions? Are there any questions?
I've got one. Looking through the warrants, I was
Is there any to clarify on this?
No, I mean, obviously bringing back the transportation alternatives program, brought me a bunch of numbers, sorry about that. We did bring it to the DDA, they did agree to a 50-50 match. At the time, they did ask us to look into curb and gutter. We did with JVA and CDOT, but just the complexity of that is going to make the grant pretty far out of our reach at this point. So CDOT recommended stick with the original plan. Because they received $43 million worth of grants and they only have about $12 million to distribute. So increasing our grant would make it that much harder to get it. They felt very comfortable with the original range that we had. And in talking with JVA and CDOT, they also felt like there would be still a way to kind of designate the sidewalk, because that was one of the concerns that EDA had without adding in the full curb component. So the application hasn't changed. It's just asking you to approve the new resolution with the right number, and then also just making you aware of that 50-50 match.
Any questions, Brenda, on that?
I have another question,
We can set the time.
Tanya. Why did we spend so much on internet on this? Is
Mayor Pro Tem Mahoney.
there a reason? Did we always spend this much in April?
Mayor Pro
Just
Tem
internet,
Mahoney.
but on Randy Lee.
somebody's calling my name.
Oh,
Just one second, we're having audio issues with the people from online.
Can you hear me?
No, we just lost you.
What's our issue?
The consent agenda, thanks.
There we go.
Talking, we didn't realize you guys couldn't hear us.
Tom, we couldn't hear you in the room. That was the whole up.
Oh, okay, I've been here the whole time.
There's a, I don't know if you could hear us, but there was a motion and a second to approve the consent.
I had a question. You guys, I guess you couldn't hear me.
Oh, good. No, we couldn't hear anyone out there. Thanks, go ahead.
Okay. It's just a silly question, but I noticed there was a lot of the AlperNet or whatever it's called, the internet, the computer services for every department had quite a bit of expenses this month. Seemed a little more than average. Is that, was there something special going on? Is this when you guys finally bought all that equipment that we were talking about buying for everybody?
Yep, so we did acquire the 4 new laptops, and so I already had to do a lot of reconfiguring, and so Christy, Rita, the new billing specialist, and Peter all have their laptops.
Okay, so it was something extraordinary, is not.
It was above.
We're still on budget for this, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions? We'll go back into the vote. Like, we don't, so go ahead, Macy.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Mahold,
Yes.
Trustee Kim Sisma,
Yes.
Trustee Severs,
Yes.
Mayor Billy,
Yes.
Trustee Sterling,
Yes.
Trustee Corvalon,
Yes.
and Trustee Mountain.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, and then we'll go into public comment on non-agenda items. We have two, those that were sent to us by Teresa Jordan, one by Kathleen Chipai. But we will also open it up now for if anyone wants to talk and tell us, give us a public comment now. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, this is Teresa Jordan. Am I good to go?
Yes,
or am I-
we can hear you, Teresa.
Oh, okay. So, Teresa Jordan, 44 Barker Road, Nederland. My husband and I have lived in Nederland for 34 years and appreciate that this town is not like bigger municipalities. Over the years, we have supported taxes the town has requested to provide better services to the community. I hope you all have had a chance to read my email, which is included in your meeting packet regarding the frozen on Barker Road. I can read it to you if you wish, if you're not familiar with my situation. Do I need to read it or no?
No.
No?
I don't think so. I
Okay.
read it.
Yeah, okay. So I just would like to add this comment in addition to the email. It is my understanding that the municipal code concerning water lines has not changed since 2001. Since 2001, the staff has fixed many frozen water lines that were in the public right-of-way in Big Springs. The town was very helpful in thawing my frozen pipe in 2008, and many others, including pipes trail in 2019. My question is, how can the interpretation of the code by the town administration flip-flop over time when the code itself has not changed? We are asking for the town to provide access to a thaw wire that the town installed for just this type of freeze. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. Anyone else have public comment on non-agenda items?
Yeah, my turn now?
Yes.
Do I need to introduce myself?
Yeah, go up and take the little mic, you gotta push the button there in the middle, down the base.
Okay, am I speaking?
Yeah, you just give us your name and address
It's not a long time. Okay.
in 3 minutes.
Okay, mic check. My name is Mahalo. Okay, when do we start?
The time is,
Okay, you just said my name. My turn. I'm excited to be up here in front of everybody. Hi, everybody. Don't start my time. Thank you very much. So now you start my time. Good evening, members of the Board of Trustees. My name is Mahalo Adam Peterson. I'm here to address several concerns that are deeply important to me and my community. Firstly, I want to express my gratitude to the town of Nederland for their efforts in assisting with the police defective vehicle knot and addressing losses of damages and theft knot. However, I must stress that there are still issues with human trafficking and a lack of respect for whales and their communities, as well as other important causes such as Standing Rock, 9/11, and a recent shooting near Europa. These issues require urgent attention and action. Furthermore, I'm a parent and teacher of food forestry and bioremediation research and development. I believe that incorporating unused spaces or spaces that need bioremediation in the town of Nederland for a proposed plan such as a food forest that's crucial for urban planning and development also. This plan has already been approved by another town and multiple other states in their major cities. For this one that I got approved was Smyrna Outdoor Adventure Center, as well as the Vocational Rehabilitation Program and the University of Middle Tennessee State. But we need the support of the town of Nederland to make it a reality here. I also want to highlight the difficulties that myself and others have faced in vocational rehabilitation programs. Many of those who have served us and promised us services and funds through these programs only to be denied by them when people need them the most. As someone who has been through this, I urge you to consider the importance of the Ticket to Work program and ensure that these are properly implemented for people. In conclusion, I also ask for your support in addressing these critical issues, making positive changes in our community. Additionally, I want to, yeah, that's how I'm cool. The importance of holding the agencies accountable for denying services to those in the military who have experienced trauma due to things like whale strikes. The trauma event not only affected myself, but also my shipmates and my family, and has lasting impact on my life. It's a crucial thing that we address these types of issues and ensure that those who served our country are provided with the support that they do need. Furthermore, as someone who's experienced abuse and mistreatment from the VA and the military, I urge the Board of Trustees to take action on it and to address these systemic issues. We must hold those responsible accountable and work towards creating a better and more supportive system that's more conscious for those who have served our country. In conclusion, I want to leave you with a quote from Naropa: "Take a breath, relax your mind, come back to the present moment. Let's use this moment to become aware of the areas where we are too comfortable and make necessary changes to create a better community for all." Furthermore, it's important to hold these agencies accountable for denying services to address a whale situation that traumatized shipmates and has greatly impacted my life since 2003. I've also like to mention that 2 years ago, a clinical director from Naropa witnessed the abuse and the torture that was happening at the VA, and they provided their last letter detailing the abuse for 2 years. This has unfortunately resulted in retaliation from the Academy Veteran Service officers, and I believe that it's related to the APA paper that I've previously submitted, and it's important that we acknowledge and address these issues to create a safer and more just community. Thanks.
Thanks, Mahalo. Appreciate it. Good job.
Thanks. I was a little nervous, if anybody couldn't tell.
You did well.
I went over the time, didn't I?
Not too much.
But
Thank
thanks
you.
for telling me the truth.
Thanks for being here. Anyone else have a public comment or none? Okay, thanks everyone. And with that, we will move into our discussion items. Evening, and our first discussion item, is the town code changes for wastewater retreatment and Andrew.
And we were actually gonna invite Weymouth to come up over here, so they don't have to alternate the mic.
Thank you.
Never got to sit in the chairs before.
When you're on, you'll just wanna press the push button, it'll light up green, and then everyone can hear.
And you really have to be close to it.
It's very nice. I feel very official.
This is our first one.
Is it the
You might, just identify yourself and then also, you gotta push that button. You really gotta be talking right into it. I'm almost touching it.
Well, I'm Melissa Whitmore. I'm with JBA. I'm a senior engineer. And
I'm Wei Ye. I am with JBA and I am a site engineer.
all right, so we were asked by the town to do an update to your municipal code focused around pre-treatment requirements for the wastewater plant. So this is just an informational presentation to generally talk about a high-level overview of the changes that were made, give kind of an explanation of why these changes took place, and just present this to the town. So there's no official action that JVA is requiring at this time. We'll talk about next steps at the end. Next slide. Oh, wait, is that the, okay, Brandon, you got it. You're ahead of me. Awesome. So just a quick background. Again, like I said, we were asked to do this by the town board. Basically, the reason that this needs to be in place is if you look at the old municipal code, there were no pretreatment requirements. So protecting the wastewater plant of the town is important for a number of reasons. It's an EPA requirement in your discharge permit. So to be in compliance with your discharge permit, you have to have pretreatment requirements in place. And that's just to make sure that your plant is not receiving too much loading, industrial dischargers, commercial dischargers, things like that, just contribute higher strength wastewater than a normal house, things like that. It's important that you don't overload that facility. There are requirements in your permit. If you hit a certain percentage of the rated capacity of your plant, you have to expand your facility. So since the wastewater plant is brand new in 2014, it's supposed to be designed to last 20 to 30 years. So we just want to make sure that we're not making you guys expand your facility far earlier than you'd ever expect to. So that is kind of the broad strokes overview of why this is important for the town. So I'm going to pass it over to Wei to go into a little bit more specifics about the language that we added in.
You can go to the next slide. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of the sections that were kind of added with this code update. If you have anything specific that you want to discuss, feel free to let me know and maybe we can talk about it a little bit more. But generally, most of this language is pretty general and consistent across most municipal codes that have pre-treatment programs. So we have a lot of existing go-bys that we've used to draft up this language. So nothing is out of the ordinary, I would say. The first section that we added was up here it says prohibited waste, but it's actually a definition section where we kind of just define different terms that we use throughout the code, just so everyone understands specific technical terms that we use. After that, it's section 13-28, which is prohibited waste. So in this section, we kind of just list out different wastes that shouldn't be discharged into your wastewater system. And that is because it's either difficult to treat or it can cause problems to your wastewater treatment plant down the road. So stuff that you want to keep out. Some big things include high levels of BOD, which can come from specific dischargers. So I would say for the town of Nederland, BOD is probably your biggest concern, with some things like pesticides, nitrates can also be a concern, but BOD is the main one. Next section we added was best management practices. Also can be shortened to BMPs. And these are just kind of guidance to the general public on how to discharge waste to not affect the system poorly. So how to maintain, say, grease interceptors, stuff like that, to make sure that they are working properly to take out the grease and the bad stuff from their waste. After that, we have the section 13-31, which is grease interceptors and oil/sand separators. And this is specifically to provide guidance on what kind of system dischargers need a grease interceptor versus a sand oil separator, as well as how to size it depending on the expected waste discharge from that facility. So it'll take into account how many taps are in, say, it's like a kitchen or something, taps, dishwashers, anything like that that could produce waste. All of that will be taken into account, and you can size the system that is needed. After that, we go into sections 31 through 36, which is all generally under pre-treatment. All of those sections touch on different aspects of pre-treatment. I believe the first section is specifically what the pre-treatment is for. It doesn't go directly into designing like the grease interceptor, because pre-treatment is very specific to the dischargers. So it depends on what kind of waste they are discharging to your system. So a brewery would be different than a grow house. Yeah. And then finally, the last sections, 37 through 45, I would say are some of the, it's more legal language to allow the town to enforce these new codes. And if dischargers are not applying to them, not following the new codes, they can seek compensation through this. But of course, you want to work with your customers to build a good relationship, but the language is there if they're not being compliant. Yeah. So yeah, that's basically an overview of the codes. If you have any questions, you can ask them now.
Perfect. And then final slide. Awesome. So just kind of wrapping up, basically the next steps that you guys are looking at is looking through the code, making sure you're comfortable with the language. I believe the attorney needs to look through it as well and give their kind of legal blessing to make sure it meets all the requirements that you need it to. And then making it retroactive to existing facilities versus only new facilities moving forward, I believe is something the board had discussed, giving a compliance window. But yes, is something for you guys to discuss. Yeah, that's all we have on the pre-treatment, if anyone has any more specific questions.
I have a little question. Thank you guys for doing this, by the way. This is really good information. You know, what the main source of, say, insecticides or introduction of, but
BOD.
BOD, yeah, what would be the number that we have, and I can get as to what the number one source? Solar.
I don't know if we've gone into a ton of in-depth looking at specific institutions throughout Nederland. These are just very common things that are typically discharged from commercial or industrial facilities in municipalities. So you put broad strokes language in kind of per your EPA permit to make sure that things that and when we say affect the wastewater plant, it's a biological process, so you don't want to kill all the little bugs. So a lot of those pesticides and the high strength wastewater can do some damage. So I don't know if there's any specific industries that we're looking at in Nederland. Don't want to comment too much on that. I might leave that to the town, but the acronym that we mentioned, BOD, is biological oxygen demand. And that's just where a high organic strength wastewater, so like if you pour a jug of milk down the drain, that's a big fat load all at once. It takes a lot of oxygen to treat that, and a huge sluggish of that to your microbes in the wastewater plant can do some damage. So that's what that happens.
Oh, okay, that's actually good information as well.
Yeah, just to add on to that, DBA did a study for a new brewery connected to our sewer system. And if that brewery had not diverted some of their waste streams, some of their hops and barley and mash, and taken on some best management practices of rinsing and cleaning vessels appropriately, then what they would discharge to the wastewater plant would be half of what the entire plant could handle. So thankfully, they've been doing a good job of separating a lot of that stuff. But this is, instead of working with one specific brewery, these are setting up kind of basic standards for us to work with the rest of the community as well.
What was talked about in terms of the compliance period?
So I believe the language right now has a compliance start date of January 1st, 2025. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what's in there, which would give us a lot of time to conduct a lot of outreach and work with these businesses. I would personally advocate for having these requirements apply to existing communities, or I'm sorry, existing businesses, because there's probably not going to be a lot more breweries being connected, a lot more restaurants, et cetera. So really, we need to be able to deal with the businesses we have. And just to be clear, Wayne did mention this, that you'll see some requirements in there. We're not going to be going out the gate and say, hey, you need a flow monitor, you need a sample port right away. We're going to approach this as a partnership of, hey, let's just work together. You know, we're working for the same community. Let's do what's best. And then those requirements would come in only if absolutely necessary.
Is there a strong argument for a different compliance period, or is that just what's been settled on as just kind of best practice?
Well, this might be a good moment for me to introduce Dave Lewis, who I probably should introduce sooner. Dave Lewis is with Direct Discharge, and he's our contract ORC. So he has the licenses that could really run our facilities. And we're on the ground, but he's our operator responsible in charge. But not only that, he is the pre-treatment expert in the state, but probably in the country. I'm attending a operator school this week. Just today, he gave a really good pre-treatment training to people all across the Rocky Mountain region. So with that, I think it might be good to have Dave introduce himself and maybe weigh in on that question.
Before we introduce Dave, I just want to say really fast that Dave's been working with us for a year, and you have yet to have the opportunity to meet him, so this is great. But I also think that's a huge kudos to the utilities team that we haven't had to bring Dave into this board setting. So Dave, go ahead, take it off from here. I can't hear you.
You're muted, Dave.
I unmute myself, it goes a lot better. So, can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Great. Hey, sorry I'm late. As Andrew said, I was teaching class all day, so trying to get caught up on that. We had a help night tonight, so trying to catch up some students. But I guess if you guys want to, if it's okay, can we repeat that original question? I was taking some notes and trying to keep track of what was going on. So, what was the original question?
Sure. The question was, so the compliance period, Andrew had just said is kind of been talked about of having January 1st, 2025. And I was just curious as to whether or not that compliance period or for that date is sort of best practice, kind of giving all the companies or, who's already attached, 2.5 years, or is there different best practices associated with that length of compliance period?
Of all the cities and towns I've done pre-treatment work for, it's always kind of hit or miss on what the compliance deadline is. So there really isn't, a steadfast rule of it needs to be done in this amount of time. What I would encourage the board to consider is, because you are going to go after and quote unquote, look at the existing sources as well as whatever the potential sources are in the future. And we definitely want to make sure that we don't run business out of town. We want to keep those businesses in town, make sure the revenue is still there, and just be good stewards of our, wastewater treatment process. I think a lot of that goes into training, just going out. Andrew and I've already done a little bit, going out to these breweries, because in Ned, that's our high priority folks. Go out to these breweries, make contact, make sure they understand who we are, what we're trying to do, rather than going out there as a police officer saying, here's the new rule, you've got to come into compliance within X days. I don't think that that's the right way to go about it. It definitely gives everybody in town a sour taste in their mouth, and especially a small community like Nederland, you definitely don't want to have bad neighbors. I like the idea of the 2025 deadline, because that gives Andrew and I plenty of time to actually go and meet with these folks, learn what they're doing. If they're doing something that maybe isn't going to really fall within the ranks of the rule, it gives us an opportunity to work with them and try to figure out how we can better support their needs, as well as, providing them a better option to make sure that they can come into compliance. At the end of the day, Nederland's been the way it's been for several years. There have been some new breweries and stuff coming in town. I mean, the Pioneer Inn's been there forever. This is something new for the whole town, and we certainly don't want to come out of the gates looking like the bad guys.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it needed to be longer, like give it a full 2-year cycle instead of, just a January, and because we're now almost May, June, when it would actually, potentially become code. And so didn't know if a full 2 years would be more better. So I was sort of curious.
I really think that's a board decision.
Is it like does that make sense? Because I was going to say, is it more of a soft compliance thing, kind of guidance? And then, you got 1.5 years to really work with these folks. But if someone's getting there, working, making headway, but not there, in my mind, that sounds like it's up to us to decide. There's some flexibility in that date, if it's reasonable. Dave, is that right? Or you feel like we're putting the plan at risk if we wait long?
It could go either way, guys. I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to get down the road of making sure that we're protecting the wastewater treatment plant. If that takes 2 years, if it takes 5 years, as long as we're working at the same goal, I don't think it's a big deal.
Thanks.
I have a question. This is Tanya. I think it makes perfect sense what we're doing here. Are our requests pretty average for most communities of our size? We're not. We're not asking anything
Absolutely.
extraordinary or anything.
No, I worked with the town of Lyons on their pretreatment program, and they went hard. I mean,
Okay.
they were overloaded on their wastewater treatment plant, and they went straight at the industries and said, "This is what we're going to do." And it was a hard sell. It was a tough couple of months to try to get everybody on board. And I do actually believe, after I got done writing their program and helping them out, I do think a few businesses left Lyons. I
Too
don't want to see
intense.
that same kind of thing happen in Nederland.
And so we're not that bad. We're kind of middle of the road or how would you describe it?
I would describe it exactly that. I think
Okay.
kind of middle of the road. I think between Miranda and Andrew and the team down there, just thinking forward thinking about the future. Andrew understands the new regulations that are coming down the road in terms of Reg 85, Reg 31. We've had several conversations about it. And then obviously the support from Miranda saying, yeah, let's forward think. Let's actually get ahead of the 8 ball here. You guys are definitely not behind, but the fact that you guys are thinking ahead puts you one step ahead of everybody else.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry if this is listed in there, but is there a plan for conducting regular inspections?
Sorry, JV, I believe it's quarterly. I think the standard frequency is quarterly.
Yep, I think the standard frequency is quarterly, if I'm remembering correctly, and then there's a provision that gives the town staff the right to go take samples at any time if they feel that something has taken place, like if they're seeing spikes or anything like that.
And inspections are going to be conducted by town staff?
Yeah, so we'll be working closely with Dave and his crew to set up the SOPs and to train staff on the methods. But long term, yes, request town staff.
And just last one on that, do we know, so if this would take effect, let's say this summer, what's the soonest we could get inspections done for businesses in town? Because I think that's kind of plays into this compliance period, right? Like without them having had an inspection and knowing what they need to come into compliance with, it's kind of tough.
I personally feel that would be a little short for us to get the program up and running this summer.
Right, yeah, not before this comes into effect, but I assume that the inspection would happen after this comes into effect. I was just wondering how long it would take.
Yeah, Dave, I don't know if you have any insights. I don't think we have very many businesses or customers that this would apply to. It's likely it's a small town, but I would certainly appreciate the time to perform that outreach so it's not coming out, hey, very soon you need to be doing this. So really like to have the time so we can develop a relationship and work together.
I have a question. How do you work with so you got one brewery that's, in a big shopping mall and some shopping center building that someone else owns, and then you got two standalone buildings. I mean, do they deal with their systems totally differently? Because to some degree, Very Nice doesn't, didn't put their plumbing in place. They're kind of plugging into a system that was already there, where the other two are standalones. Is it harder for them? Like, how does it compare? Look at these two types of buildings and how they, their affluent with all their orders, how their discharge, be dealt with.
Dave, I'll defer to you for that one.
Yeah, so it's a little bit hard to hear, but I think I got the gist of the question is, how do we differentiate between one business that's right next to another one? Is that kind of the gist of
A
it?
big building that has lots of other businesses in it, and then the other two breweries that are standalone buildings. And sewage.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the problem. It's a little bit of a problem when it's the system is or the building or the business has been there for a long time, right? That's the big part of why, Andrew's comment about let's give this as much time as we can. That makes a lot of sense because there are several businesses in Nederland where, there's a common, like where the sub shop is, right? That's kind of a commercial area, quote unquote commercial area. There's a sub shop there. We're certainly going to take a look at the sub shop. Now, all of that flow from the sub shop is also commingled with all the other businesses on that street. So we have to figure out how to essentially get a sample of just the sub shop's wastewater. And that's not as easily done as it may sound. A lot of times what we have to do is we have to make that relationship with the owner of the business so that they understand what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it. And it's not so much an enforcement action as much as it is, hey, we're just trying to be good stewards. Let's figure out a good game plan to make sure we're getting the correct samples so we can quantify what kind of waste stream you're putting to the wastewater treatment plant. Separate businesses that are, kind of out there by themselves, those are easy. We just find a spot in the collection system that's close to the discharge point from that building, and we do some sampling. And then we basically use a couple of different factors. Say there's 10 houses upstream of it. We got to take into account that the BOD and the TSS and the flow from those 10 houses have to be subtracted from, say, building A, because we can't just say building A is putting out all of this wastewater. We got to do some math and try to figure out what's going on upstream of it. But you're certainly right. Those ones that are, kind of in a strip mall, if you will, or something like that, those are a little bit more difficult. But to Andrew's point, making a good solid relationship with those folks right out of the gate is the key to this whole operation.
Just to add to that as well, I think that the beauty of going out and having that conversation is you can take a look at what their practices currently are. So love the idea from Dave, you should still go out and get samples of those individual dischargers. But if you show up and you can see that they're, only putting municipal style wastewater into their particular tap and being really good stewards on, like, if we're looking at a brewery, for example, all of their high strength waste, the wort, troop, things like that are completely separate, and they're dealing with those by not putting them down the drain. That looks like a different conversation than if they're just shoving everything down there. So that going out and seeing what the individual people are treating their tap connection like, I think will be very instrumental in determining how to assess each business.
Yeah, so my question is, when are these consultations going to happen with businesses?
I think we'd like to start, as soon as we get clear direction from the board, I think we'd like to start that outreach as soon as possible, and that staff training as soon as possible.
Because if we can guarantee that we reach out to every business that's going to need to have an inspection by the end of this year, for at least to inform them of this code change and start consulting with them on what they might need to do to be, come into compliance. And I think January 1st, 2025 sounds about right. But if we're not going to be talking to them until this time next year, then I think we need to push it back.
I understand your previous question.
Yeah.
Now. Sorry about that.
That's right.
I would like to start the outreach this summer.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
We don't want to be like lions. We're trying to do it a couple of
Right.
months.
Yeah.
Doesn't go well.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
If I can jump in here real quick, is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say, if you guys are going to do a code change or an ordinance review, you're going to have to do some sort of a public notice, right? You're going to have to put this in a public a public paper. Somehow it's going to have to get notarized so that people know that it's coming. What I've done in the past with smaller towns like the size of Nederland, because not all of your industrial users or commercial users, they don't, they get the paper or they get the internet or they get the emails. They don't necessarily read them. But when it does come to an ordinance review that does directly affect a certain group in a town, I would like to work with Andrew, and basically once the board gives clear direction on which way they want to go on this thing, we will develop, you guys and as a team, we will develop this letter that we're going to put together, a public notice, if you will. And once that goes out to the residents or however we see fit to actually public notice that update to the ordinance, I like to personally go out to hand deliver these notices to the commercial or industrial users that are directly affected, and just make sure they know that it's coming and have a conversation in person and let them know what it means versus having them go to your Muni code and trying to understand it on their own. It makes it a lot easier to just hand it to them in person and have a 5-minute conversation. And then a couple weeks later, they always call me back and say, hey, I got a chance to read the Muni code. Thanks for the 5-minute conversation. Now here's my follow-up questions.
Love that, thank you.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Thank you guys for the report and from JBA. Thank you, Dave, for helping us out for the past year on all this stuff, and appreciate you too, Andrew, doing great work with the wastewater treatment plant. I guess my question to all of you guys is, how can we support this effort at this point?
We'll give some direction.
Yeah, so the questions before the board, and also we are going to do a little public comment, but the questions before the board is, does the BOT want these code changes to be retroactive with compliance period for existing customers? If so, what would the BOT like that compliance period to be? And then, does the BOT direct the town attorney to draft an ordinance revising of the then municipal code with these changes for BOT? So those will be our questions to give guidance from. Any other clarifying questions for JVA or Dave?
Maybe this was already asked. This is Tanya. Are there like, is it anticipated this is going to put out a lot of our businesses that, and it will be like a expense? Like, what is the, first of all, do we think this is going to affect a lot of businesses? And what is the general expense for what we're asking them? Like, how much do you think it will cost them to be in compliance?
I'm happy to tackle this one if nobody else wants to.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, so if we play this right, nobody goes out of town. And the way that we play this is essentially very, very transparent and very, very factual. And that's the point of having Andrew and I show up at every commercial resident or commercial building, hand them the new ordinance and explain it to them as best we can in a 5-minute interview, and then have them absorb it and then figure out what they want to ask questions for next. In terms of what I know of Nederland, this is not going to cost businesses a lot of money by any stretch of the imagination. It's literally a little bit of an education to understand that you can't put all of your wart and everything down the drain. You got to do something different with it. And I've done a lot of brewery work. I think a big struggle that the brewery folks always come up with is, what am I supposed to do with this sludge that I have left over after I, make a batch of beer? A lot of people sell it to farmers, and I don't think that that's happening in Nederland. We actually met with one brewery a few months ago. This guy's taking it out to his farm field and putting it on the ground. That's perfectly fine. But there's certainly avenues that breweries can take where that it's actually profitable. And I think that comes with education. And I'm happy to sit down with any brewery in town and tell them, here's X, Y, and Z places that will pay you for what you have. So sometimes, there's an opportunity here for some of these breweries to actually make a little bit more money than what they're making and come into compliance. And that's what I think that Andrew and I sit down with these folks and understand exactly what they're doing. And that gives us the opportunity to talk to them and say, yeah, you may be taking it out to a farm field and it costs you $50 in diesel to take it out there, or you could make $100 a barrel.
One thing I will add is,
thank you.
Anticipate that, most restaurants have grease traps. Back when Chris Pelletier was here, he did do grease trap inspections, and we also required that you show us hauling records. Required was really more like asked, because we didn't have this policy in place, and we did have record that was occurring. So in terms of the compliance, while there may be some industries that need to have a more robust system, we do believe that there is compliance currently across the board, and so it may just be modifying that system slightly, or they may already be in compliance and we're just verifying through inspection.
And Andrew, the other thing I'd add or suggest is when it's about disposal of some of this other bioorganic material, of getting in touch with the Zero Waste Committee and see if they've got any ideas.
Yep. That's a great idea.
That is a great idea, because maybe they could be the broker that brings all the ore down to the cattle and the big ranches, because I know there's a great market, but when you're in Longmont, it's pretty easy to get out to the farms when you're in Netherlands. It just costs a lot more. It takes more time, but if there was some kind of middle person and maybe zero waste is the way to do it. But they just work with all the breweries.
Yeah. Start on that conversation now. It's a great idea.
And maybe I would just add, just a trustee Seaver's question, not only are there questions before the board, but obviously as industries talk to you, because they might, and they may have questions, just directing them back to Andrew and just helping them understand, and maybe we can share that speaking language with you as well, but just help to reiterate the importance of this. I think that's another way the board can show up in support of staff.
Sounds good. So if there's no more clarifying questions, and we have all our experts here, if we have more questions later for y'all, but I would like to open up for public comment and on this item, maybe 3 minutes per person. Is anyone?
I've been ready for y'all. Y'all are waiting on me.
Oh, okay, cool. So,
So,
it'll be a 3 minute public comment.
let me know when you're ready.
We're ready. Just
Okay, this was not scripted because I know composting. I did recycling at Middle Tennessee State University, and I have 1.6 million in products distributed to 20 nonprofits with in-kind donations that are currently just basically trash, but they're also recycling. So if there's ways that we can use these things, it's kind of important to not just throw the 20 nonprofits that are distributed to away, and also the recycling, composting, food forestry stuff. Probably a good idea to make a reason for doing stuff. Because it also saves money, probably save like 30 to 40% of your losses, and also create a reason to educate the children and the families, the unique situations, and also to create a beneficial relationship between those compost food forest places that they're ready for making corporate tubs to find a place for them to maybe put them on that whole lot, you know, actual spaces that are unused, like I was speaking of. Not using the notes, but I've already got dictated letters ready. The plan for food forestry and composting and using ash tree guilds and certain types of guilds in food forestry planning, it's good to be strategy based. I've had a 15-year food forestry group on Facebook where I'm just admin, holding space. This little hobby now everywhere, all over the globe. So trying to do what's right, making solutions. If I'm going up and I've got like 70 pounds of bagels in my truck backseat right now, it does smell funny, but at least it's getting somewhere. And then if I'm going to get in like, you know, organic India products or specialty care items for people's faces and stuff, then I mean, self-care items is kind of important when you got people tripping out about $6 billion vaccinations, and you know, that's a lot of money that it's coming out of our taxpayer dollars. So recognizing just the half and half problems that we have in life that we can all kind of see both sides is important. So if you talk about the waste management and the composting, yeah, pulled that up on a cool statement, but it's cooler to appreciate the people that do know that. And you're cool, Earthworks dude. And then also, thank you, Dave, up there. You sound really cool. I can't wait to get to know you. Anyhow, Billy was over there and they let me do this cool CBD stuff, but having the amount of CBD ready, like the actual leaves sitting there as biomass, that's totally ready to start doing bioremediation work. I'm a certified government person for certain plants like canaf, cannabis hibiscus, and several other things because I've had the experience. I know what to do, where to do it, and I don't waste time. So that's why I went and got those receipts. Other than that, I appreciate the effort that's going into your education, especially on the breweries. I was taught by Sandor Katz, the art of fermentation book writer, on how to do stuff. So when I lost like 60 gallons my first year.
Thanks, Mahal.
Oh, okay, thanks. Good to talk with y'all.
You too, appreciate it. Thank you. Any other public comments on this item? Anyone out there?
And
For this
I'm
virtually?
kind of representing some cool people. And all the zero waste stuff you're talking about.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, we got other people online as well. See if any of us out there. Any other comments on this subject? If not, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the board for any final discussions and then any direction for town staff and attorney.
I'd like to have the support to direct town staff to go ahead and make it retroactive with a compliance period. I mean, at this point, I'm fine with January 1st, 2025, and start working towards making it an ordinance. Yeah, my nod.
Nod. I nod.
We got nods.
We got 5 nods in the room.
We got loads of nods.
I see a nod out there in Hollywood Squares with Tanya, so,
Did you mention a time for compliance that we should
well, yeah.
suggest or let them suggest to us after talking to people?
The date that's out there is January 1st, I do believe, till 2025, so.
Okay, it's like 8 months or something.
Well, in a year, so it's about 20 months from now, and so we need a couple months, or less to turn this into, an ordinance. So about a year and a half, but
Oh,
I think.
a year and a half. Oh, okay, not this January, but
Right, have time to educate.
25.
If it rolls on the summer, then hopefully by this fall, the utilities would be going to meet with the business owners, and then we'd have a year and a half to bring them up. And,
Yeah, that should be really reasonable, I think.
Cool. Great, Tom, I don't know if you have any comments? And then we also need, I would like to direct our town attorney to draft an ordinance revising the municipal code, with these changes. But other than that, that's, thank you. I think we have done what we need to do here for this first discussion item. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, JBA, and I do not remember your first names at the moment, I'm sorry. And Dave. Thanks for being here, and yeah, I'll try to get your name this time.
Could I offer just a thought on political strategy for selling this to the business owners? And that is to introduce the idea and endeavor to get their buy-in prior to we passing the ordinance, such that it's not us delivering regulation without their prior, at least introducing it to them, and then they could be aware of public hearing and
Exactly.
due process.
Yeah, I was hoping that we could send around a more complete draft that we would then bring to an action item or something like that to business in town.
Yeah.
Not this one. I think it's too early stages now.
So I think, and I believe it's in the aim that we didn't have enough time to circulate it amongst the businesses before getting it to you today. But that was Andrew's desire, is before this gets passed or reviewed as an official ordinance at that time, because then they can come and also give their feedback to you if they have questions or concerns. There's that opportunity for that as well.
Yeah, I'd like to have it at least be a draft that's been reviewed by the town attorney. He starts sending around things.
That would be good, because I mean, I definitely have, was approached by one of the local brewery owners and learned a lot about this. But it would be great to have, I think, them, just like Jesse said, in the process of this and really hearing from them and just having them be part of this process as we move forward, because we need them to be stewards, as Dave said, with us.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Appreciate that.
Well, it was your idea, so good job.
Yeah, huge. Way to compliment. So moving on. We're going to go on to the biosolids study update. Andrew did such a good job with the first one.
I'm going to turn it over to Melissa and Wei again. I'm not sure if Dave is still on, but if he's jumping off, just want to thank him again. He's really the expert. We're lucky to have him for that pre-treatment stuff. And also just want to take a moment to thank JBA, Melissa and Wei, and several other staff at JBA have been working on Nederland projects for several years, which in my experience is pretty rare for engineering consultant staff, a group of staff that of experience with town. So as new staff, it's been a huge help. Reach out to them quite often on past historical stuff, and they've been a huge help. So just want to transition over to them with that.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I'm Melissa. So this one is pretty truly informational. This is the update to the biosolids report. If you put the slide. So just some background, we did an original biosolid study for the town of Nederland in 2015. Speaking to the history, I was actually on that, so been here a while. And basically what that study recommended is there was no solids handling facility at the wastewater treatment plant at that time. So it was looking at how to deal with solids at the wastewater plant. It recommended 3 phases. So phase 1 was implementing an aerobic digester that just takes the liquid waste that you have from your wastewater facility and digests it more so it's more treated. Phase 2 was including mechanical dewatering. So taking what comes out of the aerobic digester, taking all the water out of it so that you're not hauling a bunch of liquid down the hill. If you take a bunch of the liquid out, you get more what we call a cake, which is not very appetizing. It's basically dry biosolids, and it's a lot less hauling down the hill to dispose of those if you've done mechanical dewatering. The suggested phase 3 was including composting. So the aerobic digester does what's called Class B biosolids, which I'll explain here more in a minute. Composting takes you to a Class A biosolid. So that was that final recommended phase. In 2020, we actually completed phase 1 and 2. That's the new biosolids handling facility at the plant. I know the board has done tours in the past. I don't know if everyone here has gotten to see that facility, but that's phase 1 and 2 of that original biosolid study. So the update we did here recently was looking in more detail at that phase 3 composting alternative, just making sure we updated costs to reflect, it's been sometimes since 2015, and looking if any new technologies have come around since then, and if that changes the recommendation we had for the suggested composting alternative. So yeah, that is pretty much the focus of this update that we did to the biosolid study so that you guys would have it available. If you want to go to the next slide. Just kind of a quick explanation of that Class A versus Class B biosolids, because the question is, okay, you suggested going to composting, but what? So a Class A biosolid takes you to what's called kind of an exceptional quality, and that lets you do a lot more with it. So you can actually distribute that for public use. So people can come get bags of it, use it as fertilizer, you can apply it on a lot more land. It just takes away a lot of the restrictions because it's treated to a higher level. So it's considered to be pathogen free. It's essentially, a fertilizer at that point. A Class B biosolid, which is what you're currently treating to, is still a fairly high level of treatment, but there are some detectable pathogens in it at that point. So you can still land apply it. But there's kind of a process to that. It's a whole regulation of where you can land apply those biosolids. There's regulations around how long they have to be in place before you can grow crops on them, before you can have animal grazing, public access. There has to be, I think it's like 45 days of environmental conditions to take it from that Class B land applied to Class A. So it's still useful, it's still helpful for a lot of communities, it's just a lower level of treatment, so there's more restrictions in place around access to it. So that's just the difference between where you're currently at with Class B and what composting would take you to. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Wei to get into a bit more detail on the technologies we looked at in our report.
Yeah, so I'm Wei. And so we looked at several different types of composting systems in our report. The main ones that we focused on are static pile composting versus in-vessel composting. We also briefly looked at vermicomposting and solar composting. Really, the technology isn't there and prevalent to go in that direction. They're also slightly more operation intensive, so it requires a little bit more work. So really, we're looking at static pile and in-vessel, which are pretty common, lots of different methods and manufacturers we can go to get this stuff. So, and kind of give a background on the difference between static pile versus in vessel. Static pile focuses on using air and moisture to reach different temperature levels to become Class A biosolids. Generally, it's just sitting there, except for when you're mixing the biosolids with amendment, which is like wood chips or other stuff to mix with the biosolids. The end vessel is a little bit more automated. It generally does the mixing for you in some form, whether by a mixer, a rotating system like a barrel, or even there's systems that will go through and flip it for you, like special fancy machine. So those are kind of what we were looking at. And really, when evaluating these different systems, we were looking at the capital cost of the equipment, as well as other things like buildings that have to go over it, and piping and all of that stuff. O&M, so how much it actually costs to maintain the system. Really, you would need an additional operator to kind of operate the composting system, because it is a completely new facility with a lot of additional responsibilities. There's the area that the composting is going to take up, like you have to store the amendment, you have to store the biosolids, and then you have to store the finished compost, and then an area for the actual composting system itself. And other things to consider, since we are a community and where the composting facility would be located, it is near publicly accessible areas. We want to make sure there's no odor issues and that it's aesthetically pleasing. So that's all stuff that we look through, and you can go on to the next slide. So based on those kind of criteria, we really found that in-vessel composting is probably the best type of composting for a system of Nederland size. There's, again, we talked about several different types of in-vessel. Just from the alternatives we evaluated, two that we think kind of stood out in terms of cost and operational intensity and aesthetics and all of those criteria were Brown in-vessel composters, which is a rotating system, and then Green Mountain Technology. They have a mixer and like they're reused storage containers. So that's all if you read into it. But really, the capital costs of the two are pretty similar. The main difference is whether it's a continuous flow kind of composting or a batch system. And that's really up to the town to decide which they prefer. Continuous flow, just keep adding more compost and biosolids into the system, and it'll just keep going, and then it'll come out on the other side as compost. The batch, you will probably have a couple, 2 to 3 different of these storage containers, and then you load it up to a certain capacity, and then let it go, do its thing, and then you have the other ones available for loading until it's loaded, and then you can start the composting process. So operationally, they're pretty similar intensities because you still have to load them with the biosolids and amendments, but it does all the mixing for you. It should do all of the temperature coordinating for you. There's technology, there's automation, so it'll do all of that for you, which is great. And then the O&M costs, what you see here, the majority of that cost is that additional operator, because they will have to, generally you would load these composters weekly, once to twice a week is what we kind of size them for. If the facility expands in the future, that might become more frequent, or you'll have to get an additional composter to meet that demand. But yeah, it is enough for that an additional operator would be needed to be able to maintain that system.
Full time.
We're thinking full-time, but they wouldn't only be doing composting. I'm sure they could help out with other stuff, but just with the staff as it is right now, there wouldn't be enough capacity to take that on. And then, so we can go on to the next slide. We looked at some potential locations for where the composting facility could be. To note, we just took the biggest area of the in-vessel composters and used that. But some of them do, the Green Mountain Technology one is a little smaller with square footprint, so we just use the biggest worst case scenario. You'll see that 11,000 square foot area, that is for future wastewater treatment plant expansion, so additional facilities. So we wanted to show that that area is accounted for and we can't just like go into that area and put stuff there. But yeah, we had 3 different options. There's pros and cons to all of them, but I would say overall, yeah, they all work. And depending on when you move forward with this project, you definitely would want to evaluate the locations a little more, see what might be issues. We've discussed with Andrew. Yeah, so location 2, and he might be a little close to the reservoir and a walking path, but if we say put a building over everything, it should mitigate smells and other concerns. So there's definitely more to consider. This is a very preliminary evaluation, but yeah, just to give a general idea of what composting would take. To the next slide. So next steps, there's not really anything that's required now. If the board chooses to move forward with composting, we would just want to really decide on what kind of composting path we want to go. And although we try to be as comprehensive as we can, obviously there's lots of manufacturers out there that could provide composting. We only evaluated the few in our report, but there could be others out there. We don't get to all of them, but so that would be a suggestion. And yeah, getting funding to implement the composting, since it is a large capital.
Just don't give us that. In a way, JVA does quite a bit of assisting finding these funding and grant opportunities. So kind of the thing we have on here is just the town and JVA keeping an eye on if any of these funding and grant opportunities pop up. I think there's a couple that we looked at that don't quite fit our needs, but it is something that, you know, this isn't happening tomorrow. So over the next several years, just keeping an eye on if any infrastructure bills start targeting wastewater, if, you know, composting starts taking off in, you know, community organized things. There's just keeping an eye on that moving forward. JVA does kind of.
And maybe one thing I can add, and Andrew, you want to jump in the AIM, it's been recommended by staff that we do not pursue this any sooner than 2025. Really, obviously recognizing that we have a new team. We're still, of course, reliant on Dave, and will be until our own team can become overseas, and just need to give the team the time to become expert operators before adding on yet another component to our whole wastewater system. So we are asking that while we love this idea, that the board consider prioritizing this later on down the line.
Thank you, Miranda. If I can add to that, this is a wonderful program, and it you know, does a lot for sustainability, but it is kind of a cherry on the top. The first 2 phases that you focused on first are what helped not only kind of from a sustainability perspective, but a financial perspective for the town. The reduction in liquid hauling going to that dewatered cake was kind of that was the bulk of the effort. So that takes you most of the way there. That gets you the financial benefit. This is a great program if you have that outreach in place. So if you know that there's public, the public wants to take this product once it exists. If you have, partnerships with forestry initiatives, or if there's people in place who want this Class A biosolids, that's the time where this starts making a lot of sense. But if you don't have those partnerships in place, you still have a biosolid you have to pay to dispose of and land apply. So making sure you have, I'm going to say the infrastructure, but partnerships and organization first is kind of what's necessary to make this, a dream a reality. Until then, it doesn't, I don't think it's an absolute requirement. It does good things, but you've already done the bulk of it with your current dewaterings.
If we were to pursue in like, say, 2025, and it looks like from the report, expansion might need to happen like 2031, if I was reading it all correctly, maybe give or take, or at least considering expansion. At least like we get to that 90%, it's like, better do something.
Give or take, that's what's in our master infrastructure plan, yeah.
Okay, so is there any impact if we were to do the biosolids first as a project before the expansion? I just didn't know if there was something we should contemplate in prioritizing expansion first before biosolids or anything along those lines.
Of course. So one of the things we did while updating this biosolid study was make sure that it could handle what we expect that expanded capacity to be. So a lot of the things we looked at, it would be instead of 1 day a week of operation, you'd now be at several days a week of operation. There's ways to mitigate that. But behind the scenes, we kind of asked the manufacturers when we did those updated quotes for that expanded, what we expect that expanded thing to be. So the earlier you do it, the more, I'm not going to say a guess, but following the master plan, looking at existing growth in the town. The longer you wait, if there's some crazy population spike that we weren't expecting, you can capture that. But until then, at least start some planning it.
Cool. Well, so one of the things that was interesting was, hey, if you produce about $25 to $60, or you could generate $25 to $60 per cubic yard, $30 to $70 per ton. I wasn't quite sure if I read somewhere where it's expected or prediction of how much we would actually produce as a municipality. Were those numbers in there? And I apologize if I skipped them. Okay, cool. Thank you for being another set of eyes. But yeah, I'd just be kind of curious as to what the expected production is of the town, even if we're starting off versus we expand, what that potential output is. So.
And correct me if I'm wrong, certain way, but I think it might be safest for the town to not pursue this with certain amount of revenue in mind, because what I've heard is that it's been very difficult for other Class A biosolids to generate revenue from the product.
Yeah, and I think that to Melissa's point, when you were saying having those partnerships in place and almost probably doing a little bit of testing, some market testing of whether or not you would actually have demand, would be something that I'd be interested in doing before we even proceed with the project and making sure that there's actually going to be demand. I mean, because, otherwise, there's to be a question that, yes, it's great for the environment, but like you said, we're already kind of got it up to a place and seeing if it's worth going the extra mile.
We have one customer here.
We do have one customer. You'll be the first on the top of my list from her research. How much we buy. But yeah, but that's sort of, I'm just sort of curious, do you have those numbers in terms of how much we can produce?
Yeah, so in table 1, at the bottom, it says the mix volume, which is.
154.
Here you play out the whole package. Page
Okay,
14.
page 13, page 154 in the back. In table 1, compost volume generated.
Mhm. So the last line is volume, and that's in yards per run, and run is basically 1 run of the biosolids. Like, I think it's
That's page 155. Sorry.
10.8 cubic yards per run. So that's about how much you produce during one biosolid's complete life. It defines a run a little bit more in the report, I believe, but that is kind of how we quantify it.
So 10.8 cubic yards per run per batch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It runs batch, yeah, okay, gotcha. Cool. And then. Let's see, so one of the things that I found that was super interesting about this information was cool on the biosolids, but I think what's even more potentially interesting to our constituents is the capacity and where we are in that capacity, because I think we get that question asked a lot. In terms of like new development that's coming in and, oh, we don't have the capacity or anything. And so I think that there's an opportunity for like a little bit of PR, some snapshots or whatever. If there's not, you know, Miranda, if we could get something posted on social media or a town website, I think more so than the biosolids, that's where I really gravitated to in terms of the education of folks.
Yeah, we calculate that every month. In terms of hydraulic loading, we're in really good shape. That organic loading, as JBA mentioned in the last presentation, that's a little bit closer to our limit, but you're correct, we're in good shape in both places. I'm happy to work with Miranda and Peter to put something together.
Yeah, there's a perception that we're at or over capacity. I think based off of previous information that was perhaps inaccurate. And so.
Correct. We had identified that the way in which a lot of these calculations were occurring was not quite an adequate reflection of the plant. And so when Dave came in, he changed a lot of that and has determined that, again, as Andrew said, we are in good shape.
You may have to be featured on one of our upcoming episodes of BOTV. Just let you know.
Happy to do that. And if you don't mind me interrupting, Dave texted me how many tons of biosolids we produced last year, which was 28 tons. So I know he's on the call, and I'm really not trying to inflate his ego, but he's also a major biosolids producer himself. So I just want to give him the opportunity to see if he has anything to weigh in on here. Sorry about that.
We'll make it a one-time-a-year thing, Dave.
How does 28
one time a year.
How does 28 tons compute into cubic yards? I'm sorry. Come on, Melissa.
Dave?
I don't really have anything to add. I was trying to stay in the background. I saw that there was a biosolids talk, so I figured I'd just hang out and see what that was all about. But I completed the annual biosolids report last year for 2022, and the town of Nederland produced 28 dry metric tons of Class B biosolids. I don't know what that turns into in cubic yards. I'm a wastewater guy. I don't deal with cubic yards. I'm sorry. But yeah, 28 tons for a compost operation is very, very minimal. When you think about the cost to create compost and the cost for the initial investment at 28 tons, even if we got up to 35 tons dry metric tons a year, that's really difficult to pay that equipment off and pay for an operator. That's just my opinion.
And Andrew, we kind of work through this and do like a public announcement on this. It'd also be interesting, and I don't know if we could do this or how you feel about this, Miranda, but it talks about getting to our capacity, 90%, and it's articulated in terms of like gallons or that's metrics that was in there, but not necessarily number of people. And I wonder if there's a calculation in here or whatever that kind of gets at approximately how many people that could be an increased load could take on our wastewater plant, because I think that's how people calculate in their heads rather than in pounds or loads or anything like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I remember before I started working here, I read that, and it was hard for me to understand, but I know in the master infrastructure plan, there's a really good section on projecting future growth and how that relates to what comes into the plan. So we'll take another look at that and put something that's more public friendly out for the community.
You have to just do a little bit of translation.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to figure out how many people is that, kind of the thing. So.
And in that plan, we do an estimate of how many people that is based on the expected growth that we were given. So some of the developments that were coming down the pipeline, even if they were pipe dreams, putting those farther out in the future. So in that master plan that Andrew's referencing, I think we do have this is the number of people.
Okay.
To just make that really light. And please don't quote me on this because I'm doing this in my head, but it's about 32 cubic yards.
You just stay and do all of our math for us.
I was just thinking the same thing, Melissa. So I run a operation where we centrifuge dewater lagoons. We actually dewatered the lagoon at Nederland several years ago. And we have, regular, side dump trailers that you see running down the road hauling gravel and stuff. And we shove about 15 to 18 tons in one of those trailers, which is about 45 cubic yards. So that would make sense.
I have a real quick question. Is there a reference system that you guys are using that's at high altitude to kind of baseline the data off of for this? Are there other municipalities at high altitude that are currently utilizing this or these systems?
Yeah, so when we spoke to manufacturers, we made sure to mention that Nederland is high altitude. Crested Butte is another one that's currently doing composting, and that's been very successful for their community. And I don't want to rile anyone up, but a little bit harsher alpine environment. Oh. So, no, yeah, composting has worked in to jump in a little bit more, there's a large number of composting alternatives available. Part of the reason that we focus so heavily on the two that Wade mentioned is specifically because of where Nederland is. So the vermicomposting, the solid composting, they have no reference installations in anything remotely similar to Nederland. So the ones where it's in vessel make just a lot more sense for this environment. We had garage doors ripped off, like we know it's windy and cold here, it's tough.
I was just gonna say, we have higher quality managed.
Just question, do you have a in-vessel composter? What's the nature of their system?
There's a static pot.
Well, I'll also articulate that Boulder County was talking about putting an in-vessel composter over at the transfer station for the community. And so that so an in-vessel composter was sort of already identified for our area for another reason.
For different kinds of
stuff.
Yeah, and just to give a little bit more reference, Brome Composting specifically is a company based out of Canada, so definitely used up cold conditions. And then, a lot of these composting manufacturers have a lot of municipal references, so definitely can check those out if you're more interested.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, we've coming from Southern County. There was a composting effort that happened there. And there were two sides to it, right? The first was it was really challenging to get the community to not put certain things into compost because that would ruin the entire batch. And then the second was it just took way longer than they expected it to. So
yeah, I used to live in Fraser, and this was a while ago. There was more low-tech efforts, but definitely something where they're trying to figure out good quality composting firms, and the temperature really just killed the whole effort. It was too cold.
Yeah, and that's a great point. One of the simple phrase you hear to meet these Class A and Class B is time and temperature. So the hotter you are, the shorter you can go. The colder it is, the longer you have to go. So the colder environments, you have to take that into account and just plan for that longer duration. The other thing I think that this report focuses on is composting solely of the wastewater biosolids from the aerobic digester. Like you mentioned in Fraser and Summit County, it gets a lot more difficult if you do like an industrial facility where people are doing providing their own compost and mixing it in. Because like you said, people add things that they shouldn't. I live in Denver, and right now they're significantly reducing the items that they said they'd allow because people are taking advantage of the system. So yeah, it gets quite a bit easier if you're managing that influence stream to be the Class B biosolids that you're starting with. That That also helps reduce the size of that system because you're not starting from the waste stream from your wastewater plant and going straight to composting, which some people have done, but it makes it quite a bit harder and a lot bigger system. So going from your aerobic digester to this composting helps reduce the size of that system.
Thank you. Any more clarifying questions? Tom, Tanya, do you have any questions for Melissa or Wayne or Dave or Andrew? Andrew?
No, I've learned a lot, including conversions.
Yeah, I'm good too. I don't have any questions. Thanks.
Okay, we would like to open up for public comment in 3 minutes. Any comment on this biosolids update? This is something that will come back before us one day because we're just right now talking about it, learning about it. We likely won't pursue things any earlier than 25, but any public comments?
Always down to comment if you'll take it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, cool. So wastewater management.
Go ahead and make sure your green light's on and you're.
Okay,
There.
ready. All right, so. Talking about converting cubic yards depends on the specific material being measured. Talking about density of the material will determine how much volume is occupied by a given weight. So if you're trying to convert 28 tons of gravel or something like that into cubic yards, the calculation would look like this. To determine the density of the gravel, let's say 1.35 tons per cubic yard, divide that weight, 28 tons, by the density, 1.35 tons per cubic yard is equal to 28 over 1.35, which is 20.74 cubic yards for gravel. Not that this is gravel. So anyhow, other than that, let's see. Compost food forest station for veterans. I've got a lot of other things going on over here because I'm very busy. And so the basic thing is you're going to have outputs, inputs, and different things. So providing a 5-year model for a food forest community project along with potential inputs, outputs, and ways to address veteran-related issues. You got to have inputs. You have to have land. You identify suitable land for the food forest and ensuring it's accessible to the community and has suitable soil conditions, water availability, and sunlight. Resources, you got to gather resources such as seeds, saplings, tools, equipment required for the food forest development. And you have volunteers, recruiting volunteers to help with the project, including veterans who can benefit from the project's therapeutic aspects. Funding, secured funding through grants, donations, partnerships to cover expenses such as land acquisition, resource procurement, period. And maintenance, obviously. You've got outputs like food production. The food forest should be designed to produce a variety of crops, including fruits, nuts, vegetables, and herbs, which can be harvested and distributed to the community. Now we're talking about like certain types of situations. Environmental benefits, the food forest can provide a habitat for wildlife, increase biodiversity, reduce soil erosion, and improve air and soil quality. Community building, the project can bring together people from diverse backgrounds, promote social cohesion, and foster a sense of pride and ownership in the community. Therapeutic better benefits for veterans. The project can provide veterans with opportunities for physical activity, social interaction, and connection with nature, which can improve their mental health and well-being. So addressing veteran-related issues, you got outreach, accommodations, support, and community building. I'm not going to go through all these, but overall, Food Forest Community Project has the potential to provide numerous benefits to the community, including food production, environmental benefits, and community building so you can educate. So by actively addressing the needs of veterans, the project can serve as a therapeutic resource that supports mental and physical health, also for children.
Thanks, Mal.
You're welcome.
Tanya, have her hand up.
Tanya,
Hi, can you hear me okay?
yes.
I just wanted to take the opportunity to remind people, or at least let them know for the first time, that on April 29th at the Community Center from 10 to 12, we have Dr. Bernard Amadei, who is the co-founder of Engineers Without Borders. as well as his friend Glenn Pepper, coming to talk with us about sustainability. And providing us with some knowledge about system-based modeling as it pertains to sustainability. And that sustainability actually does pertain to all issues, including financial sustainability, existing infrastructure, housing. It's not just a green problem, it's a pervasive lens through which we view communities. So if you want to attend, that is 10 to noon at the community center on April 29th.
Thanks. 10 to noon at the community center. April 29th. Thanks, Tanya. Any other comments on this biosolids subject? Yeah, the only comment I have kind of response is, it sounds like talking to Dave that this may not be cost effective for us, hard to say, can we produce enough to make it worth it, but if we table it or, hold on to it, learn more about it until 2025, it's hard to know with things. We look at climate models and stuff around the Rocky Mountains, and agriculture could shift in a very different way. Maybe there'd be more of a market, or maybe the price of these things would come down too, so. Anyways, what other comments do we have? And then again, the question before the board is, does the BOT support pursuing Class A biosolids no sooner than 2020? Any other comments?
I think we should support that in 2025.
God. Five nods. Tanya. Thanks, everyone.
Just make an ask. I know
Yes.
that this was really an important thing for Trustee Severs. I just would love, I don't think we've heard from Trustee Severs, so I would love to get your feedback before we move on from this agenda item.
Can I say something?
Of course.
Thanks, Miranda. Thank you guys for doing this work, and yeah, I really appreciate it. I think I was very motivated to learn more about the feasibility of pursuing this. I have a quick question as far as the volume of biosolid that's produced in going from B to A. Because my understanding would be that we would be adding some feedstocks such as wood chips, for example. So I'm curious if the volume would increase or decrease in terms of what we have. That's a lot less of volume that we're producing than what I was imagining. That's only 3 dump trucks roughly per year, which is not much money. I was thinking that I could sell this to my customers for on the order of $2,000 a dump truck, and I was thinking that we might be producing a dump truck every week or so, but it's not that. Even if we were doubling the capacity of our wastewater treatment plant, it's still very little. And so yeah, I'm a little disappointed to know that we're not producing more volume. Curious to know if Dave or either of you know if the volume goes up or down in the conversion from B to A.
Don't know the exact ratio, but it should go up slightly. The amendment that you add, so wood chip, soil, things like that, I believe in table 1 it's like a 60% to 40%, so 60% amendment to 40% mixture. So it won't be exactly that, because then there is some additional treatment and volume goes down, but it should be an overall increase in volume. So that can be a good thing if you have a partnership and someone to sell it to, and it can be a bad thing if no one wants it and now you have to dispose of it. So
Right.
double-edged.
I'm also on the Parks Department, and we're always taking care of grass, and there's food forests, things of that nature that we could use this stuff for. And also, I believe you're the Sustainability Advisory Board liaison, are you not?
Yes.
Nicole, yes, you are. So I'm wondering if the SAB is interested in considering the feasibility of this as well, and just kind of giving us an opinion. Very much in support of postponing any movement on this until 2025, given, you're getting oriented to the position and everything, Andrew. And also curious to know if there is motivation. But, we do have the town shop, we have some land up there that's very much out of the way. There might be something that we could do to work with Boulder County to do some in-vessel composting, maybe not, or doing some batching up at the town shop area out of the way. You guys are driving back and forth between there and the wastewater treatment plant all the time anyway. And then maybe using it on parks, saving money on hauling. It's not gonna generate any revenue for us, but maybe we could do that with just Class B, if we have to isolate it for 45 days and then just use Class B so as a park fertilizer. That could be something we could do, but yeah, all about waiting for now, but I'd love to see it come back around in 2 years or so. Thank you for doing the work.
And I think part of it, Andrew, was in order to catch up on some maintenance that has to happen.
Yeah, just to provide a little bit of additional context, I think, all the staff in the utilities department would be really excited to do this.
Right.
Creating biosolids is one of the most rewarding parts of our job, and I think this would be more rewarding. I just view this as like a hierarchy of water and wastewater operations, and there's some fundamental items that we're behind on, and I would feel much better if we could focus all of our efforts on those fundamental needs. And I feel comfortable that we'll be pretty well caught up by next year and look at this following the
Blocking and tackling, get that done first.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it, Andrew. Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Wade. And so I think with that, we'll move on to our third. I don't know if the third one calls you, but for our third discussion item, water meters.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Wade.
Thank you for your time. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah. Sorry, I don't have a fancy presentation to provide to you. So in Nederland, homeowners, property owners own the water meter that tracks their water usage, but you have to have a water meter to connect to your system. Right now, the property owner owns the meter, buys the meter up front, and then, water meters, like everything, don't last forever. So when the meter dies, or the transmitting unit that transmits the reads to us dies, they are responsible for paying for that replacement. And reviewing, kind of going through some meter installs, because we're behind on replacing meters. It can be a challenge, a bit of a surprise to residents that aren't accounting for that, $150 to $250 replacement fee. And it can be a barrier to us trying to replace the water meter. And so we did some digging around, and what Denver Water is basically what we've proposed here is that the property owner still owns the meter, is responsible for the meter, but if the meter needs to be replaced for normal wear and tear, that is accounted for in the town's operating budget. They do not have to pay for it. I don't know that I'll describe this very well, but the way I look at it is, everyone's meter's on a similar lifespan, and it really long-term doesn't make a difference to the town whether we collect the money to replace those meters through water rates or through a fee. I just feel like it's a little bit more customer friendly to pay a little bit every quarter rather than get a big $150 and $250 bill. Just to be clear, if someone were to break their meter, for example, their water pipes froze, their water meter froze, they would be required to replace that meter at their cost. But if their meter, for whatever reason, normal wear and tear, no longer works, that would be covered by their water rates. And I think the tricky issue is really, if the board is interested in pursuing that, is this year, because we'd like to provide a credit to people that recently paid to have their meter replaced. And then we did not budget for making this change this year. So this year, we included some budget impacts for this year. We estimate the credit impact would be around $15,000. And then the annual expense of replacing these meters would be around $18,000. Miranda, I should maybe stop putting my foot in my mouth, but correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think we could try to absorb it in the budget this year. And then in future years, we'll account for it in the rate setting process.
Correct. Yeah, that would be our intention. So, I know that the Board of Trustees has expressed a desire to look back at rates and maybe bring Raftellus back online, and Andrew did start some initial discussions with them. We should really look at that and in a way in which we could absorb this fee. Currently we're set on that 5 to 6% increase again next year, can that cover this replacement? And just a reminder, we estimate over 100 accounts, and so estimating is challenging because we could be underestimating and could potentially not be receiving payment for the water used. And so it is in our best interest to replace all the meters. There's an incredible team who has already replaced 100 meters in 2 years, and that's incredible. And so historically, we haven't been able to do that. And so they're ready and eager to replace, but to Andrew's point, very often is if we're calling and saying, you're gonna see $250 on your bill, then you're like, well, I'm fine with estimating. It hasn't hurt me so far. Well, there's no interest for them. And yes, code requires compliance, and sure, we could go that more regulatory route, but that's not our style, it's not Andrew's style. We don't want to do that. So we feel like this is minimal to be able to seek that compliance and to have a better record of our water consumption.
So just calculating it out, that would be an immediate addition to the water bill as it is of about roughly 10 or 15. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we would look at it, we wouldn't do any sort of increase in rates this year. You're already looking at that 5 to 6% next year. We would just credit back anyone back to 2020, 2022, I'm sorry, who have paid for a meter.
Okay.
And so what would happen is when they saw, for most people, that's their base fees. So when they got their bill for the next quarter, they would have credit of about $200 and still be paying usage, rather than paying people back with just credit their account.
Cool idea, guys.
Red babe. Nice.
Tanya and Tom, any clarifying questions out there?
Of course. Anything you hurting?
Daniel, we can hear you.
We can hear. Tom?
None for me.
Thanks. Tanya, any questions on the water meter? Any clarifying questions before we go to public comment?
No, I'm all for it.
Anyone else in the room have any clarifying questions? That will go to public comment, specifically on this is the revised code for water meters. This is just a discussion item. So the question before the board is that we would direct the town attorney to draft an ordinance revising town code with these changes for be approval at a later date. So any public comments on water meters? Okay, hearing none, we'll bring it back for a final discussion and then just a direction for Jennifer.
Let's do it.
That sounds good. I'm just gonna read it. I would like to ask for some nods to direct Jennifer, our town attorney, to draft an ordinance revising town code with these changes, recommended changes for our approval at a later meeting. Any nods? We're nodding here. Thanks. Tanya? I think we're there. Thanks, so appreciate that, Jennifer.
I just want to give a big thank you to Andrew for so many reasons, but this was really Andrew's idea, and I think it's a great way of just showing that customer service, and Andrew just embodies what it means to be great with customer service, and we'll always put them first. So I really thank you, Andrew, for bringing this forward.
Thank you. Thanks for all the support. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a great idea, and thanks for all your work tonight. It's your all good presentations. A lot going on. You guys. Great, well, thank you. Does anyone need a break? How are we doing? It's 9 o'clock. We got one more discussion item before probably. Well, we got one more discussion item on amendments to election section of the NMC, and then a pretty straightforward action item and then some staff reports. Okay, we're gonna take a 5-minute break. We'll come back at 9:12.
Deal. Thanks.
Hope you feel okay out there, Tom. exists now. And we're back, so we're going to go into discussion item 6.4, amendments to the election section of the NMC, the municipal code. Jennifer?
Good evening, Mayor, Board of Trustees, Jennifer Madsen, Town Attorney. Before you tonight is an item that's ordinance 840. It was on an action item and it was moved to a discussion item. Primarily, I think because of a significant comment related to the ordinance. That comment came in yesterday with a lot of materials. And I have not had an opportunity to review that information. The ordinance relates to changes to the election section of the municipal code. They're could be characterized as minor amendments. But I wanted to ask the Board of Trustees if you would like me to review that comment and be able to answer questions on that before moving forward with this.
I personally do. Man, I was just kind of really confused trying to read through all that, and I think there's some good stuff in there, and it's just hard to. I just don't feel like I have deciphered enough to weigh it accurately, fairly. Because you know, there could be things out of it to help us really approve the code or not, but I just feel like I could use the time and your legal review me first.
I'm happy to do it. I just don't want to do it on my own initiative because it will take time.
How much time?
Well,
How much time do you estimate it will take?
I don't know because I haven't looked at it in
Okay.
that detail.
Okay, I think that's a, there's no way you could be prepared tonight. There was a lot of material to digest. I just like to have a bead on roughly how much time we're talking about. But it does have to be addressed.
I mean, could we bring this back on March 18th with that, or March, May 18th?
Yeah.
No, 16th.
Yeah, I thought that there was a request for the number of hours that it would take for me to review it. I mean, I will.
Well, this is Tanya. I'm fine with you reading the email. I'm just trying to understand because I have some questions about it that probably would be answered by you or I don't know who else. So, and I also on another topic would like to discuss not another topic. On this topic, I'd like to discuss what you've brought to us here also, because I don't know when I'll let you. So first, I guess you want feedback on should you look at the email, and I would say yes. And then when we're done with that, I wanted to talk about some things that I'd like to see coming back.
I think this was, I can't remember when your birthday was, but I think we had talked about this stuff in a.
No, I was there. We talked about,
Okay.
I think this is a discussion item, so I have some things I want to discuss, but let's first go on with.
One of the, we've had a lot of, on this matter, we've had a lot of misunderstandings. We've printed gobs and gobs of paper. And I've seen an assertion that all of our minutes, previous minutes, and for that matter, the entire packs are supposed to be on premises. I've been told this for people to look over without filing a core request. Is that accurate, Miranda? What are we supposed to have on premises versus online?
I can respond to that.
Okay.
And there's nothing in the Open Records Act that requires physical documents at the town hall location.
Okay.
So regarding this, what you're doing here with the election, I don't find anything very controversial about it, but what I'd like to see added when you, if possible, is a discussion on how do we handle vacancies and have it in the code for the future, because I feel like this still doesn't address the problems that we had last year, which were not that uncommon, but we had several vacancies that I think if we had language in the code on what to do for them, it would solve a lot of our problems from the beginning of the season, which were not very good for those that were there. Common scenarios like what happens when a trustee runs for a mayor and they win. Common scenarios like, you know, a trustee resigns during the run up to an election, but not with enough notice for you know, more candidates, or, you know, someone within a few weeks of the election. What would you do then with that vacancy? We had to then have another appointment like 2 weeks after an election. Like, it feels like there's room in here for language in our code to be very specific about scenarios and how they should be dealt with. And I don't know if that's possible. And that could be brought up as a discussion or an action item next time.
It can be. I can address it the next time I bring this forward. One of the ways, I mean, in addressing it, the primary consideration is state statute that allows vacancies to be filled by appointment or by special election. So you're a statutory town. So the way that you fill vacancies would be by appointment or by a special election. I mean, one question would be, how would you want to fill those vacancies that you would spell out in the town code? Would you require then that a vacancy be filled by an appointment automatically? I mean, I think that's probably.
So there is no way, and I guess I'm having a hard time understanding, there's no way to write in the code that vacancies could be filled by people who are actually running for the election at that moment.
Well, that's available, that's an option irregardless of whether that's in the code or not. I mean, so what you would be putting in the code is essentially a mandate that any vacancy is filled by an appointment of a candidate.
Gotcha.
Is that something you would want, Tanya?
I would like that as an option. Yeah, because it was a real nightmare when we had those 2 vacancies and then the special election. And then during that special election process, we had a trustee resign when we had candidates that were running that could have filled those positions. There would have been no wasted time on any of our ends. It would have been seamless. And it just seems like if you've got candidates and people that have done gone through the system, gotten the signatures, and are on the ballot, it seems logical that you would just use them versus, you know, waste staff time, waste lawyer time, waste our time on a really large process. There was a 3-month mandatory waiting period for the election or something like that from the date of it, a lot of, and so then we were running on a really small board. I mean, it wasn't a picnic. And it seems to me, yeah, I would like language like that. I think it's more logical. But I know we have to vote on it. I like it to be an option in the action item. It doesn't have to be, we don't have to all, if we don't agree, we don't vote for it, okay, but I would like it to be an option, yeah.
What other folks think?
Well, in terms of the ordinance language that's put before us now, we still don't want there to be the ability for the board to cancel elections.
Oh, I don't either. Yeah, I don't either.
Oh, right, even if it's the same number of
Even, yeah,
seats as candidates, we still want the record of people having the
Yeah.
chance to vote.
Well, we kind of need it if there's four terms and 2 terms. People, it's who gets the most votes is who gets the 4 terms. So
When there's a vacancy, so like this upcoming election in April 2024, the terms that are ending, that are 4-year terms, the person who gets the highest vote will get the 4-year terms, but many of these terms are 2-year terms to get them back on track, and so that's how you structure whoever gets the highest number
Oh,
of votes
yeah.
gets 4-year terms, and then some people, the person who gets the least gets 2-year terms of the number of positions available.
Well, it totally makes sense, and canceling an election would make it, I mean, how would you determine who gets the first term?
Partial terms up for election. You could be a full board that runs your full term and then you're constantly on your 4-year cycle. Wishful thinking. But yes, Netherlands history in a lot of ways has always had partial terms that are on the ballot.
So I'm getting, I think I'm getting a nod of 4 to remove that cancellation.
Mhm.
Yeah, Tom, nodding.
Yep.
Yeah.
do we have a nod of 4 for her to review the email and use?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, we haven't done
I didn't see that.
it. So don't. Okay, we'll keep that. Then speak. So we don't have a nod, well, we don't have a nod of 7. Do you guys want to express what you're thinking? Not that we need it at 7.
I mean, while the email obviously pertains to elections, I'm not sure that it pertains to these specific, like, vote cleanup changes. So I'd like to see those
No,
things coupled.
It doesn't, but I still would like some responses. I'm going to have some questions to the attorney after she reads it. So
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we're gonna take on this other issue, then fine. But to me, these are not the same issue. So
they're
if we're
not.
gonna do this thing, then let's just do this thing.
It is their priority.
If we're gonna take on some other thing, then if the board wants to do that, fine. But I just would like to keep these things decoupled and keep it clean.
I mean, I guess the only way it connects, and it doesn't seem fair to talk about it since she hasn't read the email, but is that the email states that all these things are already in the code and we're being redundant by even going through all this. Because the past code has already addressed pretty much every issue that's up on here. But I don't mind going over it again and fine tuning things. So
What do other folks think?
In your opinion, Attorney Madsen, do any of these changes besides the cancellation of elections, like, is there anything here? Because what I'm seeing is that it's essentially cleaning up how we already do things.
Right, I mean, the reason for the change to 2.4 was because there was arguably some ambiguity in 2-4 previously. And so the reason for that is to clear up the ambiguity. 2-1 is consistent with the way that elections are run, that they can be through the municipal election code, or if it's coordinated, then it's under Title I. And then the write-in candidate just allows the opportunity to have somebody write in, and that's the only person that they could be. If they submitted an affidavit, that's the only person that could be written in on the ballot.
And that was already the case.
No, this is 2-5 is new.
Okay, that's me. But we did have the possibility for a write-in candidate in the past.
Yes.
So.
But the affidavit is that, that you can't count a write-in vote unless an affidavit of intent has been filed. Yes.
And that's consistent with state statute.
Right, that's how I understood it.
yeah, I thought we already had something like that. You couldn't just write in a candidate without a certain amount of time before the election. And
It's good to have it in code, but it is required under election code in the Nederland Municipal Code, which is why on a ballot, like the sample ballot that was provided to you, you saw write-in lines. There were 3 write-in lines because there are affidavits for those. If there's no affidavit, there's no write-in line included on your ballot.
So I guess I've always seen like, oh, get your affidavits in for write-in by this date every time we've had an election. So we've already been operating in this way. And so what I'm just trying to say is we're not really changing anything in the way that we have done elections here.
We're just truing up.
We're
to
just
how we're doing
clarifying. So if we're gonna make significant changes or do this whole code review around elections, I think that's a separate project. And I'm fine if the board wants to do that, but I don't think we should tie it to this. I think we should just get this done.
I see what you're saying, and this can be moved to an action item. So yeah, I see what you're saying. What are you guys thinking?
I agree with Eric, and I would like to visit our election, broadly speaking, and find a way to incentivize a universal voting culture here.
That's the other concern that just came to mind for me as well, is that the percentage of people who seem to be interested in voting is significantly lower than I would have expected, as I'm finding out more involved I get. So I guess I'm a little confused. This being prioritized right now, I guess that's my confusion right now, is that we don't have enough participation in my mind. So how did this become a priority? I guess a little bit of a confusion point. So I guess maybe I'm not understanding the risk of not taking action on this right away. And I don't want to misunderstand.
I don't think there's any risk with not taking any action on it tonight. But Trustee Coombs Ismail was here, Trustee Corvalon, and Trustee Wald was here. And it was a difficult process last year with what happened in the election and with filling vacancies. And then the town was sued by somebody who wasn't elected and then wasn't appointed to a vacant seat. And the lawsuit was based on the language of 2-4.
Okay, so this is more or less kind of a protective cost saving measure, more than maybe it could be designated as such.
Well, it's to clear up any potential ambiguities before the next election in April of next year, in the event that there's a similar situation.
They ran as 4 trustees, so they all had to show up just to be quorum. Always.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So, which is why I would like to see some language that would make it so that if there are candidates in a situation when we just had an election, they fill in the vacancy. Because otherwise it does feel like we're cherry picking. Like, oh, well, now we have our chance to get who we really want in, even though that's not what happens, but it comes across that way.
I mean, you could make the argument that that's exactly why it works that way, because the people who actually do get elected should be the ones who choose the people that they serve with, not the people who don't get elected.
Agreed.
Well, I mean, it's interesting point of saying, I mean, they did get, they would have been elected had there been that vacancy, even though the vacancy was already there, like that's the part, the logic that I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around. When you're having an election and at the time when, a month ago, when you wrote the ballot, there was only 3 vacancies, but at the time of the election, there was clearly 4 or 5 vacancies. Those people did win because, if you have 6 candidates, then the 5 top ones fill in those. So I guess that's a fundamental, just a difference of opinion, I guess. To me, it's pretty clear that they did get elected. They got elected far more than somebody who got appointed, I think, by 5 people versus somebody who got, 200 votes, like, I don't know. It's something I'd like to bring up to discussion. Maybe now's not the time. But it was not a great scenario, by any means.
I think the way that it is now, it allows the BOT to sort of make a judgment and say, you can look at the election results, for instance, as a board and say like, this candidate lost by 1 vote, like, the slimmest of margins. Let's just appoint them and serve with them for the next couple of years. But if somebody like kind of loses in a landslide, then you might make a different decision, right? You might think, oh, this person is kind of not convinced the town that this is where they should be. So maybe we should appoint somebody else, right? If we mandate us to appoint somebody, then we don't get to make that judgment call.
Agreed. Agreed. So, I'm just gonna say the questions before the board. Does the Board of Trustees have any questions on this ordinance? And there's proposed motions if needed, but, any other clarifying questions? And we'll go to public comment. If not, we will open up for public comment specifically on the election code, amendments to the election section of the municipal code. It's number 840.
Kathleen has her.
Kathleen. Anyone else online? Kathleen will use it.
Hello?
Oh, there you are. Okay, go ahead, Kathleen.
Kathleen Chipai, 32-year resident, 20-year business owner. I want to thank everybody for this being moved to a discussion item. Really, thank everyone. My research is all based on public record and following the paper trail that is supposed to be attached to every word in the code. It shows that Ordinance 177 has a paragraph on how to fill all vacancies. The town has implemented this language throughout its history. There is no paper trail of it being removed, and if it was there, it wouldn't have taken a year to seat the board or require 4 different processes or have caused a violation of 2 residents' rights and triggered a lawsuit. With no record of the vacancy language being removed, it still exists. I believe no ordinance is necessary whatsoever. Simply tell the Muni Code to put it in the code in section 2-5, which is now reserved. Ordinance 729 is also supposed to be in the code, and it isn't. Again, tell the Muni Code to put it in the code as it was passed and recorded and is supposed to be in the code. If the board and the people don't like what Ordinance 729 does, then the board should repeal it. It pretty much replicates the same outcomes as the language proposed tonight, and the language in both is arguably anti-democratic in both canceling elections and forcing write-in candidates to apply before an election in order for the town to count their votes, if anyone writes them in. There is no reason every write-in isn't counted. There is no hardship on election day to add a write-in name to the tally form. The only reason this is being proposed is because you do this if the town wants to cancel elections. According to those 2 statutes, if the town wants to cancel elections, it has to pass this. But the language in 729 already has, and it's been misrepresented because it's 20 days in that ordinance. The affidavit needs to be filed 20 days before an election. But I believe it's anti-democratic. I don't believe anyone should have to have an application in if anyone writes them in. From the 9-minute BOT discussion at the last meeting, it didn't sound like anyone on the board asked the attorney to find out how to cancel an election or to not count write-in votes. questions do need to be answered to the public, like who can make changes to the Muni Code? And did anyone request this language from the attorney? I talked to the ex-trustee Dallas Masters today, and he has confirmed all the BOT packets, the ordinances, the zoning maps, that all has to be at town hall. I'm horrified when I hear the attorney say that these documents don't have to be at town hall. I'm horrified. The rest of my time, I'd like to answer any questions because I'm sure you might have some. Hello?
Thanks, Kathleen. Any questions for Kathleen?
We'll be discussing this again, so I think I'll save any questions for after Attorney Matson's had a chance to review it.
Okay, great.
So I did find something on the Secretary of State website, so I don't know if this is exactly correct, but it does seem to say that the governing body of a municipality may provide by ordinance that no write-in vote for any municipal office shall be taken unless an affidavit of intent has been filed. It doesn't say that we must require that. So in that case, I would be in favor of striking that out altogether as well.
Yeah, I will second that. I thought we were informed that it's state statute and we have to follow it.
Right. So,
It's being misrepresented as required, and it is not at all.
right.
Well, we are at the mercy of the information given to us.
I know, and I apologize for that.
I was just gonna say that I pulled that up too, following the statement, as when Attorney Munson had spoken to me, and yes, it does say the statement may, and so, of course, whatever the board wants to do is absolutely fine. We've had no interest in writing candidates in the time that I've been here in 2020. We did have a writing candidate who did in fact file an affidavit as part of the process, but and there was a write-in line, but in 2022, there was no interest or written candidates. However, I do want to note there also was no line on those ballots. So.
Yeah, I think it would be a nice idea to put a line for write-ins on every honestly, because I mean, if somebody magically managed to not be on the ballot and get more votes just by people writing them in, then they should serve.
Yeah.
If they want to.
Well,
yes.
So yeah, I agree with that. I don't need to have that on the language about the writing candidate. We can just, if we don't have anything, then it's allowed, right?
That's right.
So can I hear from other members of the Board of Trustees on that particular provision about writing candidates? Is that something that you would like to remove from the language of this ordinance? And what it is it requires an affidavit of intent 64 days before the election date in order to be allowed to be a write-in candidate. You don't serve that affidavit if you don't provide the affidavit of intent. So in other words, if you don't have it, then you can have anybody write in. Do you have requirement? Then it's only those people who submit the affidavit.
I personally think 64 days is too many. If you want to have some limit, you can make it 2 weeks. So that, but I don't, I mean, 64 days is very premeditated.
Yes. Question for me is, anyway, is a good thing in my mind. Is the 64 days that perspective? So I guess I'm with the specificity of 64 days.
I wouldn't change the number of days, either have it in or don't have it in. And the reason to have it in is because once somebody is elected into office, then they have to take an oath. And maybe a write-in candidate isn't going to take an oath. So it gives a little bit of assurance that somebody is really interested in serving on the Board of Trustees.
Why would a write-in candidate not take the oath like everybody else if they win?
Because maybe people write them in and they have no interest in serving.
Yeah,
They wouldn't take the oath.
It's just, I think, thanks, Captain. I think it's, yeah, it's just that they may not have been they may not have chosen it, they're just being.
Oh, okay, well then what's wrong with just having like 2 weeks notice then? Why is it 64 or nothing? I don't understand that logic.
Give us, it specifically says 64 days is what we may do. Doesn't give us another time frame.
Who doesn't give us another time
The
frame?
state.
So if we do it, we have to go to 64 days if we don't do it.
I mean, we don't know, but that's what it says here. It doesn't say like up to 64 days or 64 days at least. It says 64 days.
And it says may.
And it says we may provide that ordinance. Yes.
So there's flexibility. I mean, we can establish, but that's sort of, they've said is.
To me, we're a small enough town that we can, I think, probably handle a write-in campaign, which I think would probably come about specifically if not enough people signed up in the first place. Right? That would be what triggered a write-in campaign. And if you need 64 days notice in order for that to happen, then it kind of negates that functionality for us as a tiny town, right? Because that would be way too much lead time for us to react to the eventuality that nobody's running for mayor, right? Like, better get a write-in campaign going. Somebody's got to do this job. We wouldn't be able to do it if there was 64 days notice required.
Yep.
I'm in favor of empowering Jennifer to give us some cleanup work, and also in favor of encouraging or approving Jennifer to engage with Kathleen to address some of her points. And Kathleen, I imagine you're still online. I would request that you, try to be specific and clear with your, because I think you submitted a couple different versions of your email just to ensure that is that you have your final thing before Jennifer starts to think about it.
Yeah, we'll give you some time, because I think if we give you 4 weeks, we're gonna revisit this on May 16th, so we can give Jennifer some, time to work this in your schedule to look at this, Jennifer, and then, Kathleen, thanks for the work you've done. I mean, you actually pointed out some things that have been helpful, which we appreciate. And, I hope you're able to get some sleep and, give yourself some time to think through this, and then, maybe communicate things, in sequence in one kind of collected email, and it'll be easier for all of us to move forward with info.
I have a question related. What happens if nobody runs for mayor in an election?
I think Julian painted a bleak picture a year ago in March, saying that the town, you have to have a mayor, I think, in this statute, or I wonder if that's true with the EMS on the town. Couldn't maintain.
I'm curious, like what happens if
Oh, I mean,
nobody
it does
runs for
mean
mayor?
that someone doesn't, I think the board can appoint.
Yes, then it would be an appointment or a special election.
Which again is articulated through state statute.
Yes.
So you just try again, like there was no candidates, but maybe there will be if we try again.
Right.
Well, maybe it would help not having that write-in limitation, so, okay.
Thanks, so I think we're gonna, give the nod for you. Make things happen, and, I'm gonna revisit this in May. Any other comments or questions before we move on? Hearing none, we will move on to our only action item of the evening, the skate park ordinance. Update. So, Brandon.
Yes, so we discussed with the Board of Trustees the request to amend the skate park ordinance to remove that razors and scooters would be prohibited from the skate park. As a reminder, the Parks Department really determined that it hasn't been an issue and they feel it's appropriate to allow those uses of the skate park. So this ordinance provides that official language change, as you will see on the second page of ordinance. And so really the question before you is, do you approve ordinance 841?
So we go with clarifying questions. So this is an action item. Any clarifying questions? Tom or Tanya? We'd like to open up for public comment on this skate park update. What we're doing is moving to remove the restriction of razors and I just had it and I moved the page. Razors and scooters, because the town is found there. Any public comment? Here, we'll go ahead and bring it back for a final deliberation and a motion.
I move to approve ordinance number 841, amending section 11-82 of the Nederland Municipal Code.
Second. I just wanted to make sure, does anyone want to discuss or have any questions on this motion before we?
Nicely done, Mr. Mayor.
Want to make sure everyone's clear on this. This, the board members are clear. And is anything you want to discuss? If not, I think I can restate the motion is that there was a move to approve ordinance 841 amending section 11-82 of the municipal code. Of a second, so Macy, you ready?
Trustee Kenzisma,
Yes.
trustee Severs,
Yes.
trustee Mountain,
Yes.
trustee Sterling,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahold,
Yes.
trustee Corvalon,
Yes.
and Mayor Billy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So that finishes up the action item of the evening, and now we have staff reports. Miranda, did you want to touch on this? And we got a few minutes to say. I mean, yeah, they're in the packet, and we want to thank all the staff for putting the time and energy into their reports, always, as well as this week and this month. And got 8 different reports in here. We appreciate everyone's time putting those in there and all the work that is being done. All of you. Any other comments from you folks?
It's just really nice to read about the that professional development trip to Bentonville that Nikki was on. Severs was there as well. Sounded like it was really productive. I'm glad that it happened.
Thank you. Anything else from the trustees? Any other business?
To adjourn.
I'll second. No need for discussion. Macy?
Mayor Billy,
Yes.
trustee Mountain,
Yes.
trustee Corvalon,
Yes.
trustee Sterling,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahold,
Yes.
trustee Severs,
Yes.
and trustee Kenzisma.
Yes.
Thank you. The meeting is adjourned at 9:51 p.m.
Thanks, everyone. We appreciate your time tonight.
Nice work, team.